This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
All right. Have you been keeping up with serial killer news recently?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
I'm only bringing this up at the beginning because that's kind of what we normally do, but there's honestly too much news this week. So Herb Baumeister has a new victim. Did you see this?
I did see that.
Robert Picton, who's the pig farmer in Canada.
Yeah.
He is probably going to die as we're doing this. He's probably dying because he was attacked in prison.
Right.
And it caused like a serious, I think from what I've heard, and I don't know this 100% sure, I think he has an injury that's causing I think it's basically a traumatic brain injury. He was attacked with a broomstick, and it appears that it has, from what they were saying, it's either his eye or his temple. Like it's a life-threatening injury. So there's that. And then there's the Connecticut River Valley killer searches. These are going on in New Hampshire. It's like an hour away from where Maura Murray went missing, probably unrelated to all of that. But the police are executing search warrants up there. Did you see that?
No. Now tell me again.
This is in New Hampshire.
Okay.
So
But what did you call it?
The Connecticut River Valley killer. So this is one of those cases that we sort of covered with a guest.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when we were talking about the different murders up there?
Yeah, I remember.
The book Shallow Grave, we were promoting that briefly.
Right, yeah, I remember.
Okay, so this one is for some reason, they are searching in New Hampshire. This is in like the last few hours. But apparently sources have told News 9 or WMUR up there that the searches that they are conducting are for physical evidence related to unsolved killings in the Connecticut River Valley in the 1970s and 1980s. This is investigators in a neighborhood called Kellyville, which is in Newport, New Hampshire. They are executing court-authorized search warrants. I think they did it Tuesday, and my understanding was that they had started to wrap it up, but that they were still going when we started recording. Officials did not say what cold case they are specifically relating this search to, but Senior Assistant Attorney General Scott Chase did come out and tell WMUR that these are court-authorized search warrants under seal. We cannot discuss what cases they are. Now, there are at least two unsolved cases in the Newport area. One is the 1980s killing of 17-year-old Bernice Cortemach, and then the 25-year-old young lady Ellen Freed. Bernice's body was found April 19, 1986 in Newport, and Freed's skeletal remains were found September 19, 1985, which is close to this area in Kellyville. So potentially some of this could be related to some of these 70s or 80s cases if the source is giving up accurate information. We've talked to a number of people over the years about these particular cases, and we've talked to Maureen Boyle. Now, do you remember those cases?
Yeah.
Okay, so when we were talking to her, that was the New Bedford Highway killer. That was actually Massachusetts. But my point is, there's some overlap in there time-wise and place-wise that has been speculated about if you go online hunting information about these two cases. So I thought that was interesting that that's going on. They have also identified a serial killer in Canada and with U.S. ties. Did you read about this guy?
I did.
That case is one I've started to dig into. When I looked at it, I was a little confused at what was going on there, but they have identified Gary Allen Sereri, Srey. Specifically, they have identified him as killing a slain Windsor woman. So basically, the RCMP had a press conference last week, and they said that a woman from Windsor was among 4 that were murdered by an American sex offender who was in Calgary in the 1970s. She was 20 years old. Her name was Melissa Rehorek. Her body was found in a ditch. It was off a gravel road outside of Windsor in 1976. Now, Gary Sereri, he was actually serving a life sentence for sexual assault in an Idaho prison when he died in 2011. Melissa is the third of 4 women and girls that they believe Gary killed. And investigators have put one of those pluses by his name, and they've said that we think there's more victims. But they have said that Eva Dvorak and Patsy McQueen, they were both 14 when they were found on a road underneath an underpass just west of Calgary in February 1976. And then Melissa was found a little later that spring. And in 1977, Barbara McLean, who was a 19-year-old girl, she was discovered just outside of what was then Calgary city limits. The city has grown since then. But a break in these homicide cases came when there was an older break where police realized there was DNA of the killer and that it matched. Like the crime scenes matched. But then they took it to different ancestry websites, and that's how they were able to follow the path down to Siri. Dave Hall, who's the superintendent up there for the RCMP, he said at the end of the day, whether there's a charge or no charge, we're not fixing anything. And that was in response to a question during a press conference about the victims' families learning that the killer had been found. How did they react? He said that for police, this is a solution, and for families, it's just an answer to what happened or to who did it. RCMP said that very little is known about Gary Sereri and his life or whereabouts from the time that he skipped bail in the United States, which would have been early to mid-70s, up until he was arrested and convicted of sexual assault, and he was confined in New Westminster, British Columbia in the 90s. He had worked as a cook, a salesman. He would frequently change his appearance. He would change vehicles, and he would use different names. They've been able to build somewhat of a timeline, but they believe he is a true cross-country, like meaning crossing the border, serial killer predator. So I'm hoping more information will come out about him.
Did he kill anybody in the United States?
We don't know yet. He had a lot of rape and kidnapping charges. I think he was out on bail in 1974 when he jumped bail and went north. I think he was out on a warrant in Los Angeles. And then he gets arrested in British Columbia. At some point around, I think it's late 2003, he gets deported from Canada for a rape. And they deport him back to the United States, and he gets tried for a rape in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And he gets put in prison there, and he dies about 7 years after that trial. So he's one that's
CODIS, then.
I think that he has to be in CODIS because of the timing of it all. I think they use CODIS. And I think that the Canadians use an ancestry website, and I don't think they'll be shy about sharing that information to try and track him down. But he's a new one for me. He has never come up in my research for any particular set of crimes. When I briefly did a hunt through newspapers.com, I did see he has some mentions in there. So he will certainly be one that I turn around and take a look at. I just thought it was very interesting. We have some of those guys, because those are old crimes that they're identifying him for. Those are going to be 48 years ago in 76, 77.
Right.
He went by the names Rex Long, David Blackwell, Rex Edward Long, Travis Blackwell, Gary DeLoy. The list of his aliases is very long, according to the Alberta RCMP. But the Windsor Star is carrying information on him. So is the Red Deer Advocate. The newsroom staff over at Calgary Herald is carrying info. The Edmonton Journal. He made CNN. And I'm sure there'll be many, many more by the time this episode comes out. But his name is Gary Allen Serey, Srey. He was a convicted American rapist, and he has now been named as a serial killer in the 1970s in at least Canada. So I'm very interested to find out more about him and what he might have done. I have found a lengthy criminal record for him in the United States in multiple jurisdictions. And I can tell you that he died April 27, 2011 at Idaho State Correctional Center in Kuna, Idaho. He had a long list of convictions related to that. He has theft charges going back to the 1960s. He has different rape charges from 1965 all the way up to 2009. And I will say the bulk of them took place through about 98. But once he starts getting caught, he's basically just traveling jurisdictions to be tried by different states and different provinces.
Right, because he was during that period of time, they were actually starting to sentence people like for substantial amounts of time.
Yeah, they realized how big a problem it was. So that's some of the news that's coming in. Also, for people that follow the different like sort of big cases that like lots of other podcasts covered that I don't, I did get some notes from people, and I saw social media stuff in the feed that they were researching the house of Rex Heuermann, which I thought was unusual because you and I had followed that really closely when it first happened. And they did what looked like extremely extensive searches to me.
I think I might know why.
Well, I'm dying to know. I don't have an idea.
Well, I think it's because, let me ask you this. Is the wife living there?
She's living there, and they just went on vacation.
Yeah, so I think it's because they're going to be out of town.
Okay, so they just want to tear it apart again, and they didn't want to inconvenience them.
Or something. That's what the conclusion, because they were very quick to say that none of the residents were home. And I was like, oh, this was pre-planned. Like, they were like, we're going to go on vacation, this week. And they're like, well, that's when we'll do another search.
Yeah, that seems like it could be really accurate. I heard rumblings of he's talking or this, that, or the other. I don't have any evidence that indicates that. I don't really think that way.
I think this is what you call law enforcement and I guess spouse of perp cooperation.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, like they're just trying to figure out how to, I don't know, put all this together in a way that they bury him under the jail if he's guilty. So, and I assume that the assumption seems to be that at this point, yeah, he's probably guilty.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, that's yet to be seen. But I feel I don't think there's going to be a lot of evidence at that house. Yeah,
I saw social media information showing boxes and bags and stuff. I think I even sent you a clip that somebody shared with me of the medical examiner arriving. But that did go back through my notes, and every time there's been another search, I have noted that the coroner man shows up, or coroner SUV shows up there. So I thought that might be news, but when I look back through the notes I kept on each time they've done anything with him, it looks like the coroner shows up every time. So that may not be as interesting, but it is more serial killer news. I mean, I don't think I could pile on as much if I tried of all the serial killer news that's happening right now. It's fascinating and a whole lot of nothing at the same time.
It is a whole lot of nothing. It's disappointing when you have these connections made to a dead perpetrator, right?
Yeah.
I'm just as interested in as everybody else is, as far as Rex Heuermann goes, but I'm not following that really. Just whatever I happen to see. That is interesting though, but I feel like that's going to have a big question mark over it for a really long time.
Yeah, I think it will too. I mean, I've tried to avoid a couple of cases. I'm fascinated by the Idaho Ford case. I haven't come back to that one yet because I knew it was going to be a lot of wrangling. I'm also fascinated by Delphi, but there's been too much going on in Delphi for me to like keep up with. And the few podcasters that are trying, while I admire the effort, I don't know how they're doing that in terms of like just constantly reporting on.
Isn't it just endless speculation?
Well, no, it's devolved into like they're reporting on every motion, and the defense has picked up on it because they're filing the same motions. Like they'll get squashed on a motion to dismiss, or they have this whole Franks thing that they've been doing, and they've had multiple Franks hearings requested, and there's a lot going on there that is. It seems to be very strategic in nature. It's either strategy or incompetence, and I can't tell what. But people are making a lot of hay of it. But the truth is, about 50% of what they're seeing is normal. The other 50%, I think, is because of the high-profile nature of that particular case in that area. And I think there's been a lot of push, to get the judge off that case. They're already on their second judge. That's an interesting one that I've tried to keep up with, but I do think it's kind of a waste right now. I saw that they had bumped the trial off to later in this year, which I'm sure means next year, the way things are going. It's a possibility it could go to trial this year because people seem to think it's a really flimsy case, but it is like endless speculation on the court documents, not necessarily on the court case, just sort of on the motions and the rulings that are happening there.
Well, there's a certain degree of that's literally going to be them going through the motions.
Yeah, it is. That's why I was saying, I'd say it might be more than 50%, but it looks like 50% is pretty much pad effective defense strategy. Like you try and get certain things tossed. Honestly, like they've said that guy has made incriminating statements that he's either inculpating himself or he's actually confessing, one or the other, to more than 30 people, and like 5 of them have been over the phone to his wife and his mother. If that, or over the tablet, which is also recorded just like a phone call would be. They have these tablets that they can...
He's confessing to people? Then this is just going to get pled out.
If these are real confessions, that's how the prosecution is presenting it. But my point is, like the defense going and saying, no, we want that to be inadmissible, that is standard defense.
Oh, absolutely.
Motions. So that one, I'm having some trouble following it. I don't think we'll have real news out of it. I have some questions about how they put that together. Just initially, they hid the probable cause affidavit. They did a bunch of weird stuff from the prosecution's perspective. I honestly believe that the defense is just as baffled by that, and they've decided to take this crazy, like, shotgun approach to it all. But I don't have an opinion in that one yet as to whether that guy did it or not. Because I haven't seen like the real put together trial.
Right. I am super, super duper interested in the whole ballistic situation, but I have no opinion beyond that. I feel like that was a stretch, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. At some point we realized, I don't know if I talked to you about this or not. One of the court documents came out, and I guess it was shared on another podcast, and then it was shared online. It got sent to me and like asked what I thought of it. And I looked at the description it was just a couple of the items that they had taken. It was talking about his gun, model of the gun, and the caliber of the bullet, and the manufacturer of the bullet. I had seen that recently in someone else's home, but then I had a crazy discovery. I have that exact ammunition in my home. And
we did talk about this.
And I have a matching gun that would produce probably similar tool marks. And I thought about like, how do you try and like experiment with that? But I don't know enough about tool marks. Most of what I've read about them has strictly been from the perspective of the ability to tease out the subjective nature and look at it from a factual perspective. And I think you and I have talked about that over the years when it comes to tool marks.
That's an art, not a science. It's an art,
not a science, yeah.
Well, and, I don't know that for sure. It's just my opinion because kind of what I look, because to my knowledge, these girls weren't shot, right? And so a bullet that had been, what did they call it?
Ejected. So it had been cycled through.
Cycled through. That's what they said. So a bullet that had been cycled through a gun that they then found in his possession, right?
Yeah.
When I was like, so they were shot to death. No, that's probably not the case. Then I'm like, okay, so what's happening, right? And then maybe there's more to, the link there. But my first thought was, and this data legitimately doesn't exist in any form I could find it. But what I wanted to know was, okay, yes, that gun produces the same. But if you had like 1,000 of those guns, would they all produce the same tool marks, or would a certain number of them all produce the same tool marks? And then, like, how relevant is it to the case at hand, right? We already know the guy was out there that day, right?
Right.
And so, I don't know. I felt like it was a bit of a stretch, but I'm open to anything that they come up with there. I'm just waiting. Like, I do think all these filings and stuff are pointless. I mean, not pointless, but like it's pointless to pick at them endlessly because you're not going to get anywhere. This is literally just going through the motions.
Yeah, that seems to be what it is. And I just mention it because it's another like thing that had a ton of true crime news being reported on about it this week that I was like, I don't think that's news, but I think a lot of the serial killer stuff is. I have one other piece of news that came up pretty recently. I was going to bring it up because one of the episodes I ran recently was about Judge Ebony Johnson Rose. Not sure if you want to talk about this or not, because I think it could be. I think she's starting to. She's getting the press's attention, and not necessarily in a good way. Once they know you're there, they look at you a lot more. Because we obviously talked about sort of a sprawling year in the life of Ebony Johnson Rose, and then I noticed, like, as soon as we got done, and that was like ready to go, because we record things out of order here, and sometimes it's not as relevant later, but in this case she made the local news again. WAFB.com, they have an I-team down there, which is like their investigative team that looks at like local issues, and Scotty Hunter published an article that says judge accuses DA's office of wanting to stick every N-word in jail. And the way that they put it on here is NI *** ER in jail. And it's a quote. And it says, judge comments called into question. This is from May 14th. It has an update later in the day, but there's not much new to it. But it just says that prosecutors in Baton Rouge with District Attorney Hilar Moore's office found themselves before a district court judge who accused the DA's office of just wanting to stick every in jail, according to a court transcript of the April 2024 proceeding inside the 19th Judicial District Court in Baton Rouge. And they put a piece of the transcript on here, and it's between an attorney named Morgan and the court discussing delays in a case related to it just says a black man accused of domestic violence. She said it appeared prosecutors had not even contacted the alleged abuse victim in over 2 years. When asked about it, one of the prosecutors explained to the judge that he had just gotten the case, and that's Morgan. According to the court minutes, things came to a head when Judge Rose realized this was the fourth time that the case would be rescheduled for trial, and that's when she called attorneys to the bench for a conference and things went off the rails. Judge Rose told prosecutors if they could not bring him forward a witness that day, she was not going to let a man plead guilty to anything. And she said, he won't be able to get this shit expunged off his record. Most people don't care about young black men, but I do, and this will keep him from being able to have firearms. The judge also explains her theory to prosecutors as to why she believes they have not been able to contact the victim. She says it's a reason they couldn't get her here, because she didn't want to be here. According to the transcript, Judge Rose then accused the district attorney's office of targeting black people. So this is the quotes from the transcript. Judge Rose, this is her quote: "The young man doesn't have any freaking felonies, and I know the DA probably wants every young black man in prison, but I don't. I'm going to give these young people the opportunity to have a life, and I hope that's what y'all want too." So Prosecutor Morgan responds, "Of course, Your Honor." And Judge Rose says, "This is the fourth time, and this case is goddamn 4 years old now, and that's the best y'all can come up with. You're just going to what? Stick every," she uses the epithet N-word, "in jail?" And Prosecutor Morgan says, "Your Honor, that is not at all the intention of the district attorney's office." And it says the court minutes reflect that Judge Rose uses the actual slur during the proceeding. 19th Judicial District Attorney Moore was appalled by the comments made by the judge. He said he does not believe the comments to be her true feelings, adding she is a nice woman. He did, however, fire back against her accusations against his office, calling them wrong. It's completely and wholly untrue. We do not see our cases that come in as color. We see them as victims and defendants, and we treat them all alike. And it doesn't matter what their color is. They reached out to Ken Levy, who was a LSU law professor, and he said that the comments were inappropriate. He said judges of all people should not be using that kind of language.
They shouldn't be using that kind of language, but she has there's all kinds of problems with what's happening there, right? Not just what the judge is saying. However, that kind of goes along with, I don't think we ever mentioned it, but when we talked about her previously, we talked about her meeting with the jury.
Yes.
And then we talked about the other case where she had reduced a felony indictment charge down to a misdemeanor version of that charge that didn't exist when it came to a police officer. And that police officer, I believe he was black.
He was either black or mixed race. He looked light-skinned African-American in his official, like his uniform photo.
Okay. And so in her own words here, I can see a skew, right? A skew in thinking, a skew in the actions that she's taking as a judicial official, right?
Yeah.
Because she basically, she didn't want to convict the officer of a felony, so she made up a misdemeanor, which was it ultimately ended up with the guy being acquitted, right?
Yeah, it's still kind of why, because of some of the processes there, it's winding its way through court. But yeah, ultimately.
Okay, and I don't know what the ultimate outcome will be, but my impression of that case was that she was like, it was pretty clear the guy had done stuff, but she was trying to have him not end up with a felony. That's what it seemed like to me, right?
Yeah.
And then in the other case, they acquitted the gym teacher. And then and that lady, that was a white lady, right?
Yeah, she was an older white lady.
Okay. And she went to the jury and she ended up declaring her guilty of, like, she changed she changed the jury's verdict. Okay, so right there, I mean, I don't really think I'm talking out of turn here saying that there's a skew happening, right?
There's a little bit of a skew, yeah.
Okay, and the skew is that, like, she's more inclined to push for, like, middle-aged white women to get put in jail and to pull for young black men to not be put in jail. And I feel like I should never be able to make that statement as confidently as I just did about any judge.
You shouldn't be able to. There's been some other things that have gone on that back up what you're saying.
Yeah, I feel really confident in all that. And then the language, too. The language is disrespectful. All of it. Not just, I mean, the racial slur is completely unacceptable. It's like she's talking to her in the school hall or something. And then all the other, like, profanity. Like, that's on the record. Come on.
Well, back in November of 2021, she ordered a guy named Billy Pettis to have his ankle monitor removed while he was out on bond. Billy Pettis ends up... So he was accused of murdering his girlfriend in Baton Rouge. So once he lets him off the ankle monitor, he is accused of attacking another woman and her kids, and he gets rearrested. In February of 2022, she let a guy named Luke Simmons out on bond for a homicide on Spanish Town Road. Now, Luke Simmons, while out on bond, gets accused in a separate drive-by shooting. And look, I don't want to be the one who points these things out, but these are both young black men that ordinarily, in a lot of other jurisdictions, wouldn't have gotten any kind of bond. And I'm not accusing her of anything related to racism at this point. I think she is trying to legislate to some degree from the bench. And I have to keep in mind the fact that, like, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which I'm very familiar with Louisiana, I have done a lot of work in that area with a lot of people from Louisiana. Baton Rouge is about 55% African American. So there are a lot of young black men in her court. But generally speaking, she's got some problems going on. Levy, the LSU professor they talked to, he also comments on that. He says that violent people need to be detained because otherwise other people are going to get hurt. And that's what's happened with Judge Rose. He says other people have gotten hurt because of the way she's putting people out on bonds. There's a difference between a nonviolent drug user, like convicting them and putting them away for too long. And that is something that she seems to be working on counteracting. This is Levy's quote. He says, but the remedy for that is not to let violent people out on bond. There's got to be a balance. He says he does support what the judge is trying to do in cutting down on holding nonviolent people in prison and jail. But he says, the methods need some shaping.
How is that what she's trying to do?
By letting people out on bonds?
Non-violent people out.
Well, he's saying that, like, you're going to make some mistakes. He literally says that later in the article. He says, we all make mistakes. Judges make mistakes, but we hope that she's going to try and do better and learn more.
I don't feel like the violent part of it is in the criteria checklist that she uses when she's deciding bond or not.
Well, interestingly, the I-team down there at WAFB, they emailed the judicial administrator for the 19th Judicial Court. And they said, can you tell us why she's doing some of the things that she's doing related to these comments or bond decisions that she made? Because these comments were made in what normally would be considered a sidebar because it wasn't an official motion going on. The prosecutor was setting themselves up by speaking to the judge sort of ahead of a motion to continue. And here's what Diana Gibbons said. Diana Gibbons said that judges are prohibited from commenting on any pending legal matters. They set bonds according to applicable law based on the individual facts of the case, but bench conferences and sidebar discussions do not form part of the public record and typically are utilized to discuss the resolution of a case or of a matter within a case with counsel for both sides. So she's saying that, like, this stuff normally wouldn't even make it out. So we don't know if this is all of what she's done, because her decisions and the things that she's saying leading up to those decisions are basically off the record in most instances.
Is the response actually saying that the public record that was released as the record of this conversation is not the actual official public record?
No, it's not directly saying that, but it's saying because I'm
sorry, I feel like it is directly saying that.
Well, there's a court transcript here that shows this rant. And
right, which was released as part. I mean, if it wasn't a public record, we wouldn't be looking at it.
I don't think so. I just think that, like, I think the person who's this judicial administrator, Diana Gibbons, I think she was trying to indicate. Well, I think she was trying to say there were other things that are said that weren't a part of this conversation that had frustrated the judge.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Maybe. That would be a better way, actually. That would be better, actually.
I think she screws up saying it, or they misquote her, or they have clearly just pulled, like, a little chunk of it. I don't see the whole message, but there's, like, emails going back and forth between the I-team and Diana Gibbons, and they have pulled a piece of it. And that piece that they've chosen to share with us says that. And I think it probably was her trying to say, look, the judge can't comment on this. So she can't even say she can't tell you her side of it, because that's what state law does.
Well, right. But in the event that you can't comment on things, you need to keep it as clean as possible, I would say.
I tend to agree with you. So I'm not talking about Judge Rose because of just this comment. I'm following up on Judge Rose because, as clearly
how could
I
she
just
possibly
stated,
be in the news again?
yeah, I was just shocked that when I was combing through all these serial killers, there is yet another article linked to me about Judge Rose in my search history, and I was like, wait a second, I already saw that, didn't I?
And this just happened.
Yeah, it just happened.
And so it is kind of ironic. Maybe that's not the right word. It's something. It's something that she's because when do you see judges in the news? Like hardly ever, right?
Well, in most of the articles about her, I actually had to go back, match up a court record, and match up like a very anonymous "the judge said" to her being the one presiding over that case on that day, until the Supreme Court ruling came out. And then the issues with the Daniel Steele case, like all of those articles, like the predecessor articles, they don't mention her by name.
Right. And I feel like that's just bad reporting.
It could be bad reporting, but it also could be that the subject of those articles, when it's, a police officer or a victim, and they're focused on what happened, they're not trying to highlight the judge who is like, the judge is kind of a fly on the wall who's in charge of it. And like, that's how it's supposed to be. And it's these behaviors that make them stand out.
Right. But I mean, anytime there's a situation where you've got some of the stuff that we've talked about that she's been doing happening, it's literally about the judge.
Yeah.
Man, if you know, you know. I don't think this is going to be the end. I also think the I-Team or whatever that investigative team in Louisiana is with that affiliate, I feel like they're with a news affiliate, right?
Correct, they are.
I feel like they're going to stay on her case, so to speak.
Yeah, and honestly, like when something like this happens, that might be what needs to happen. Like in order for her to understand the impact she's having. If you guys want to read more about her, this is at WAFB.com, that's News 9 in Baton Rouge. So you can go, like there is more on there about this judge and the comments that the district attorney has made about them. And they're very limited because typically both sides, well, I say both sides, that's not the right word, but typically the judge and the district attorney are the last people you're really going to hear about, except for kind of polished press releases from the district attorney. In Louisiana, mainly who you hear talking in these cases are the defense attorneys.
Well, that was like sort of my question too. Like, where is the defense attorney in this situation?
It has very little to do with this poor public defender that was stuck there while this argument was going on. I assume he's a public defender. I could totally be wrong.
The judge is almost, because what I gathered was they were trying to dispose of this case with a guilty verdict, like with him entering a plea of whoever the defendant is. And the judge is actually sort of making an argument that a defense attorney would be making with regard to like the victims not showing up and everything. And so, yeah, I guess there is more to it. But, a defense attorney that's having their client plead guilty to dispose of a case that the judge doesn't want to continue again is not doing a great job under these circumstances, because it doesn't sound to me like they had any sort of participation that could be taken to trial as far as the victims go. I don't know what the case is about, but I'm just saying in that tiny little excerpt we got, what I gathered was like, why is the judge having this be said? And, if she had used different language, no profanity, and not using the racial slur, I wouldn't really have a problem with what she was saying. I think that is the sort of pivotal part of it, right?
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because honestly, if she hadn't have done that, it never would have made the local ABA Journal, and I never would have heard about it.
Right. And, if that's how they conduct their courtrooms and, their day-to-day whatever, that's just how it is, right?
It's frustrating for me because I come from a slightly different position than you do on this. I don't know that this is the right place for her. I'll say that I'm confused by her actions. I think that some of her intent seems to be in the right place, but it is very difficult to be that type of judicial advocate and be drawing that type of attention to yourself, because you're going to be criticized as a judge by someone in most instances. Like, somebody is going to be unhappy with a lot of outcomes. And for her to be, advocating that, particularly in Baton Rouge of all places, that like she doesn't want there to be this racial injustice happening in the way that she manages her district court, which is basically district court matters. They have, in most jurisdictions, the ability to be appealed to a superior court. And I don't mean an appellate court. Like,
No, it's just literally the court down the hallway.
Yeah, if you get convicted of, typically if you get convicted in district court, it's kind of rare that you have a jury in district court. For some reason, I have read instances here where that is clearly the case in 19th District. But if you get convicted in district court of misdemeanors, at least, then you typically go to a superior court first, and they actually put together a trial for you. That's your first step. And I think a lot of people miss that step, but Judge Rose is 2 steps into the judicial process, if that makes sense. There are magistrates. So magistrates are a lot of time like a justice of the peace. They're there to sign off on basic arrest warrants and to refer over any other judicial action. They, in some jurisdictions, they will handle things like small claims court, eviction matters, notice to vacate. They will handle
in a lot of places. They are a rubber stamp.
Typically what you're working with a magistrate is you just have to convince them that 50% of what you're saying is real for them to add the 1%. So you then can be arrested. More rarely now, in some jurisdictions, you can even go in as a private citizen and swear out some level of criminal charges on someone. The next step past that, and who the magistrate typically matters to, is a district court judge. And that is what Ebony Rose is. Judge Ebony Rose is a 19th District Judicial District Court judge. So she's at the very beginning of what could potentially be a long journey, because there are lots of steps that you can move up all the way to being like a chief justice of the Louisiana Supreme Court. You could be an appellate judge. You can be a justice. There's all sorts of things you could be.
I think she might be better suited to be a defense attorney.
That's an interesting perspective on it.
Just from what she was saying, I mean, she's literally arguing what a defense position should be.
Yeah, she is, but she's also, I think part of what she's arguing here, because I could see how some of this could be twisted out of context and used for the purpose of being sort of sensational, because they highlight her use of profanity from the bench and the use of the slur.
The slur is really, I think, the point
that's the
there.
headline.
It's in the headline, yeah.
But beyond that, I got to be honest. If I was a judge and a prosecutor had come before me on a case roughly 12 times.
Well, I inserted some of my opinion in what I read, so just keep
I'm saying this case, according to this transcript, this case has been bouncing around their docket for 4 years.
No, I would be tired of it too, but it seems like the defense attorney's place would be to speak up.
Yeah, he's not. The defense attorney is not in there
at all.
Well, in the clip of the transcripts that I have.
But he was probably standing there. Otherwise, it's an ex parte.
No, it does not appear to be an ex parte, and I don't even think that. I do not think that this defendant is defending himself. The chunk of information, I would never think to go pull this court record. So the chunk of information that is sitting here in front of me is only between the prosecutor and the judge. And,
that's it.
And that's another thing. Like, I will say that prosecutors in Louisiana, by and large, in my opinion, over the years, have largely been part of even regardless of their race or whatever, they have largely been part of an old boys club. That has not changed a lot. And
I don't
Hill
think that's
Moore,
just in Louisiana.
no, I'm just saying her being a young black judge and a defense attorney handing this off wouldn't do anything. But if you're handing this off as an assistant district attorney to your boss who turns it over to the paper, that might be why we're hearing about this, because she does seem to lean pro-defense, which happens. Anyways, I just thought that was interesting that we had just covered her and somehow she jumped right back in the news.
Right. And I would just say that whoever that young person is that's being treated unfairly, regardless of what color their skin is, they should be treated more fairly. That would be my entire take of that situation. I don't know anything about it, but you see what I'm saying, though?
Oh, yeah. Well, I decided to pull something that is out of another place that has an interesting demographic for this week. And when I say I decided, I mean you sent me something and asked me if I had seen it. And people ask me, do you have anything else about Judge Rose, by the way?
Not until the next article comes out.
No, then we'll talk about her again. At some point, I want to get her on the podcast and have a chat with her. Probably when she moves to the next level, there'll be a period of time we could do something like that. Because I know they can't comment publicly, but they do have election seasons. And if I recall correctly, hers might be this year. I think it would be fascinating. I would love to hear her perspective so I can understand it better. Speaking of, you asked me if I had seen this Paramount Plus documentary. It's a docuseries that runs 3 episodes. And I'm going to plug for it here. They're not paying me for a couple of reasons. One, people complain all the time about where are all the modern serial killers. This is one of the most unique serial killer cases I've ever seen. It is fascinating to watch it in documentary form. And I will warn you up front, the documentary is hardcore propaganda for the families of the victims, but more specifically for the lawyers of the families of the victims, because this is a situation where, in my opinion, they have sort of ongoing litigation. Now, some of that's been settled out, but it's appropriate litigation. And I don't know how many people find themselves in this position, but in 2019, my family ended up in this position where when we had an older couple in our family. They were my wife's relatives, but they were very cherished relatives to the entire family. And as they entered into their 90s, it became clear that they were going to be around for a while and potentially in need of care. And when you have instances in your family like that, it's actually kind of complex to move forward with what to do with folks. In our case, we had a relative that right before Thanksgiving 2019, they suddenly died. And they left a partner behind. So they died, they were 94 years old, and they left a partner behind that was 92 years old. And they had been functioning as a couple and able to maintain their home with assistance. But once, actually earlier that year, we had assisted with downgrading them, meaning all the family had gotten together and they had moved them into a very nice apartment close to relatives that was a more manageable condo-sized place than this huge house they had. And it was a shock when he suddenly passed away, and it became pretty clear within the months right afterwards that she would not function as well without him. In fact, it seemed like he had been covering a lot of the things that caused her some difficulties. So they made the very difficult decision to move her into an assisted living facility. And she thrived there for several years. In fact, she just passed away this year. But for 4.5 years, she was in an assisted living facility, and a lot of things went quite well. And that is what that's what happens to a large number of elderly people in the United States. If they live long enough and they have enough financial resources, they end up in this environment with other people their age where activities and needs can be centralized, sort of. This particular killer is not an angel of death killer. He has elements of it. He is not a sexual sadist that we can tell. I didn't think that he was. Did you?
No, he was not to the extent he was murdering. No.
So this killer is featured in the Paramount Plus documentary, The Pillowcase Murders. Is it Pillowcase Murders? Pillowcase Killer?
It's the Pillowcase Murders.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what it was. And I knew of him in passing. I had not looked into him, and I found the documentary to be quite fascinating. Had you heard of him before?
I don't know. If I did hear of him, it was in very brief passing. It seems like maybe in the news just briefly. And I think it was like when he had additional charges, right? Like, so stuff was already happening because I think it came up that way, but nothing that really caught my attention. No. And then that makes like watching the documentary and having all the realizations that go along with that even sadder for me that I didn't notice it to begin with.
Yeah. There's no way for us to spoil this documentary. If you're listening to this, I'm going to cover it. Meg and I are going to talk about like what this guy did, but
it's still worth watching.
Yeah, if you get a free trial, or if you happen to have Paramount Plus, or if it shows up somewhere else, this is absolutely worth watching. It's one of those cases where, as a defense-related person or a defense-sided person, I like to see all the evidence, and I like to know that the person did it. This dude did it. Not only did he do it, he is literally on video. Like,
yes.
Like it is. He is on video. He is like, his phone tracks him to every location. He comes out and talks on a podcast afterwards, after he's been arrested and accused of all of this.
That was even after the first hung jury.
Yep. Yeah. And when we sat down and looked at all of this, we realized a number of things kind of related to, if you haven't heard our episode, Hippocrates Wept, which was, it's a few weeks back. That episode talked about angel of death killers and how they were sort of unique. One of the things we talked about in there was like, how do these organizations, meaning in those instances, hospitals and medical care centers, how do they make a decision to let something continue and transfer somebody around? A lot of those type decisions are made in this docudrama, and you could track the court records to sort of show that not only did it, like, essentially owners and administrators of assisted living facilities make them, but the local police didn't see what happened. And what this guy did that was very unique was he preyed on people who were elderly to the point that, like, they were already close to leaving the earth. In fact, he did it multiple times, and he used it as a way to steal from them, to steal cherished jewelry and mementos. They show in the documentary that he had a system down where he could tell costume jewelry from real jewelry with a telescopic magnet.
Right. And just to be clear, he was 100% motivated by greed.
Correct.
He was literally doing, so this is where it kind of clashes for me, because yes, he is most definitely a serial killer. And like you were saying, he had like a whole method down, but the only reason that he was killing was to get rid of the witness that he just stole a couple $1,000s worth of jewelry, or more in some cases, from.
Yeah. So the guy that we're talking about, his name is Billy Chemirmir. He also went by the name Benjamin Toykaba. And Benjamin Toykaba was a real person whose identity Billy Kipkorir Chemirmir had carefully, like, crafted and stolen. Depending on which source you go to, Koitaba is either Billy Chemirmir's cousin or his cousin-in-law, meaning married to someone who is Billy Chemirmir's cousin. So Billy Chemirmir was born in Kibanyani village, which is right outside of Kenya. And, excuse me,
That's
which
right.
is that was the village, but it was in Eldama Ravine, which is right outside of Kenya. There, finally said all that together. His father was actually the village chief for a long time. And he immigrates to the United States in 2003. Now, he comes over with not the best support system. He's born in 1972. So by the time he's coming over in 2003, he's 31 years old. The family businesses of choice, including of his girlfriend, Margaret, who does appear in the documentary, and I don't know how she didn't know what was happening, but that's what she says.
I know exactly how she didn't know what was happening.
Well, tell me.
Right now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, because all the money that he stole, he completely squandered and wasted
So she didn't know he had it.
at the clubs that he went to and so these were completely like senseless murders. She never saw the influx of cash.
Got it. So he was using it for his lifestyle.
You can hear on the thing, and now she's speaking in Swahili, but like it translates it. You can hear how outraged she is and upset, and just, I mean, like when he gets arrested, that's when you hear their recorded phone call or whatever.
Yeah.
She's very upset, and I 100% believe she had no idea what was going on, and she never would have went along with it in any way.
In a lot of ways, she is as much a victim, I believe, as some of these other families.
Much.
Right. Well, it's she's a victim in this matter, but I don't I have trouble wrapping my head around where to place her in terms of things. The wild thing about Billy Chemirmir or Kachuba, depending on which name you met him under, he almost got away with all of this. He makes a screw up towards the end of his murder spree, and we'll get to that in a second. But that changes everything. And he's not just. I noticed that online they say he was only killing elderly women. He had killed at least one elderly man. We don't know exactly how many victims he has for a really specific reason. When these victims go to autopsy, they almost all get written off as natural causes, initially at least.
It is pretty blatant, though. Well, I don't know that understandable is the right word. It's ageism, right?
Yeah, it's the assumption that because of the age, there wouldn't be a violent crime in this locked facility.
Right. And so one of the things I thought is relevant to this is there's some statistics that are thrown out, just barely though. But in these facilities, in these retirement communities, even with the older residents, you have situations most of the time where there's a downhill. Now, it can be quick, usually not as quick as some of these presented, but you have a downhill slope, and then you end up in hospice care. And most people who are older and they have a downhill slope, they have some sort of attended death, right? They're in the hospital, that kind of thing. I'm not sure. That's the biggest thing I questioned here, because you've got this sort of onslaught of people dying all of a sudden. And I find that really hard to believe we see where some people did think it was a little odd, but that's just not something that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
I don't think. I feel like even if the person's old, you're going to have some hints right before they die.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to see some signs. What kind of connected the dots here? So, first of all, Billy Chemirmir stood out. He was very well groomed. He frequently is seen in a polo shirt or an appropriate uniform for a home healthcare company. While he may have worked at initially, he didn't really work at for very long. He did have good references for it, though, and he used it to his advantage. When you see him selling jewelry, and he escalates beyond the retirement community, I'll get to that in a second. He's wearing a tie and a pressed shirt, nice slacks, nice shoes. He is a interactive guy. He's kind of gregarious, and he's talking to the people around him. Now, towards the end of things, he moves out of this assisted living retirement community modus operandi, and he begins killing people in their homes. He even stalks a couple of people from a local Walmart to their home. And if it sounds like I'm glossing over this, I don't really mean to sound that way. I really am encouraging you to go watch this documentary because it is worth it. It is one of the wildest serial killers I've seen. And let me get back to him for a second, kind of run through what he did so you can understand like how large this is. Here's like the nutshell you'll find online. So the reason he's using the Koitoba alternative identity is because Tamir Mir has convictions in Addison, Texas and Dallas, Texas in 2010 and 2011 for driving under the influence, which would keep him from being a home healthcare aide. So he alternates, like you can't always tell which identity they're talking about, but they're both him. Now, he gets fines and very short sentences for these DUIs. But then he gets arrested in 2012 for assaulting the person that we were talking about here. And that causes a lot more trouble for Billy Tamir Mir.
That was Margaret, his girlfriend, or this mother of his child.
Right. Yeah. They alternately describe her as they share a child and her being his girlfriend. I want to say this part because this is really important. He gets arrested in June of 2016 when he is trespassing at a location called the Edgemere Retirement Community. He pleads no contest to those charges, and he doesn't really get much time for them. But that changes things in a major way, and it slowly starts to uncover him. The person who trespasses him found out about Tamir Mir's activity from a person working in the facility named Josh Ailman. Josh Ailman appears in the documentary, and you can tell he actually knew he was witnessing something very wrong that was part of something bigger and wrong. He kept pushing for management to do something about it, and they did nothing. I would call that propaganda for the lawyers, except they came with documents. And the police reports that are filed, in fact, I believe they even have an interrogation interview of Tamir Mir in June of 2016.
That is the security team actually filming him with a cell phone, because what happened was, as the situation was escalating and they were taking notice, the security tried to get the police involved, because essentially after some complaints, they were watching, and then they went back and they watched some more surveillance, right?
Yeah.
And there was this pattern where, like 4 weeks in a row on a certain day or a couple days, this guy was coming in at 7, and they took notice. They wanted the police to come out and do something about it. Right. And the police refused to do so. And so the security team recruited maintenance. And so basically, I don't know how many guys it is. It's probably like 6 to 10 guys. When they made this plan, because the police wouldn't come and help them, they took it upon themselves to get this guy into a conference room and, firmly establish he was not to be there. He had been trespassed before. And, they ended up arresting him. But it took these guys taking this initiative to do it. The police would not step in. Now, Josh had noticed that there were thefts, right?
Yes.
Specifically, there were thefts of women who had been found to have died of natural causes.
Yeah, at this point in time that they're arresting him for trespassing in June of 2016, Edgemere has already lost a woman named Dr. Kathy Sinclair. And while her case is technically closed as unsolved, the theft involved with it indicates that somehow Chamirmir had his hand in here.
It also is brought to light eventually after this is the first big thing that happens. These security guys and maintenance guys put him in the conference room. The police come and arrest him. And this is where it starts. But from there, later on, they're getting this dude's Google records. And he is being played because basically Josh was saying, well, they had natural causes on their, cause of death from their autopsies. But I can check the logs, and the pattern he was seeing in the logs are like the door logs of the residents.
Yeah, he ends up comparing Google Takeout to the electronic door log entry and exits.
Right. And so he was seeing a pattern, and basically the pattern was like, right before the resident died, they opened the door, and then like 10 minutes later, the door was opened again and shut, and then it wasn't opened again until they were found. And so he had put this together, but he was banking on, it was very prominent in his mind that the deaths had been ruled natural causes. Right?
Yes.
And so while he was pushing and he felt like something was going on, this is a security guard at a retirement community facility, right?
Yep.
And he is going, I'm going to do what my bosses say, right? I mean, because there's a pecking order for sure. But he was doing what he could. There was no question this man was not allowed to be on the premises, and he repeatedly was on the premises, right?
Correct.
And so they were able to take action about that. And, it did accomplish a little something. And it stopped what was happening there.
At Edgemere. So
Correct.
They had already, so in this time frame up till June, they lost Kathy Sinclair, who was a medical doctor. Her family appears in the documentary. Even though she's not officially linked to him, I'm telling you, she's linked to him somehow. That was in April of 2016. Then they lose Phyllis Payne, who's a 91-year-old Edgemere resident, and they lose Phoebe Perry, who is a 94-year-old Edgemere resident. And I believe that Phyllis Payne dies May 14th, 2016, and Phoebe Perry dies June 5th, 2016. So what Josh is tracing much, much later is these women being associated with someone opening their door from the inside and then still being in the room, but there's another door opening happening, meaning someone came in, 10 minutes later they left.
And then they're found dead.
Right. So once those people, they're all attributed originally at natural causes. I think Kathy Sinclair is the only one who's still considered natural causes, but Phyllis Payne and Phoebe Perry, I know Phyllis Payne was exhumed later to determine if there might have been a different cause of death. So I'm going to run down this list really quick, and you tell me if I just need to slow down anywhere here, but I want to run down like sort of the list of names here. And I'm going to say facilities, and then Meg and I are going to explain what we mean about these facilities. So after Phoebe Perry's death on June 5th of 2016, Joyce Abramowitz at the Traditions Retirement Community dies on July 20th, 2016. Then we have Juanita Purdy. She's 83 years old. Joyce was 82. Juanita's 83. Juanita dies at Traditions on July 31st of 2016. Then we have Lee Corkin, 83, who dies on August 19th of 2016. We have Margaret White, who dies at 87 on August 28th, 2016, also at Traditions. We have Solomon Spring. He's 89 years old when he dies on October the 2nd of 2016. Then we have Norma French. She's 85, and she dies October 8th, 2016. We have Glenda Day, 87. She dies October 15th, 2016. And we have Doris Gleason. She's 92 years old, and she dies on October 30th, 2016. No one suspects that any of these people died. There are odd things about each crime scene. The tying factor through most of the crime scenes is that there are thefts of jewelry.
The family report
The
that are
family
not
all report it.
they're not taken super seriously.
Right. Like, and it's difficult to explain, but like most of these deaths are considered to be they laid down, had a heart attack, and they died. There is a difference with Solomon Spring because he was on blood thinners, and it was thought that despite the crime scene evidence looking really suspicious, it was thought that he caused an injury to himself in a fall, and it had happened while he was bleeding all over the place. He's really the only one where it's a super graphic crime scene that I saw.
Right. And I don't believe I'm not a medical person, so you should probably listen to the opinion of the person, the medical examiner. But I don't believe for a second that that's what happened.
No, I didn't either.
And I feel like it's ridiculous that they're even saying it. But again, not a medical professional, right?
Well, it goes back to what, I would say in terms of populations that are vulnerable, clearly children are the first, right?
Yeah.
There are special portions of the populations that need assistance in various ways that they routinely end up in assisted living or group homes. I think they're second. That's people who have severe developmental disabilities or who have had some kind of significant trauma. And then I think our elderly are third in terms of vulnerable populations. And what happened here that made them particularly vulnerable was this guy kept getting away with it. And he kept getting away with it because all the deaths are just looked at. Anything unusual is explained away. The family is allowed to basically write up a theft report if something is missing. The police attribute it to people who live in the facility or other residents. And these people are literally sitting here like wondering what happened to their loved one for a long time. Like it's almost 2 years before anybody really understands what's happening. In the course of that, after those deaths, and by the way, Doris Gleason, her family realizes what's happened to her years later, a year and change later, because they're reading a Yelp review about the Tradition facility and the fact that these other deaths have occurred, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 deaths that occur before Doris Gleason just at Traditions. Then we have Minnie Campbell. She dies on October 31st of 2017 at a place called Preston Place, which is another retirement community. We have Diane Delahunty. She dies December 5th, 2017 on Preston Place's premises. We have Mamie Del Maya. She dies December the 8th of 2017 at Preston Place. And then we have a Jane Doe killed at Preston Place. Did you see this?
She's just not identified publicly.
Yeah, they still haven't identified her publicly. She's on December 10th, 2017. And then we get away from, for a minute,
I just want to make sure the date jumps from October 16 to October 17.
Did I say the wrong date?
No, that's what you said. I just want to make sure. I don't know. I'm asking.
So all of those deaths take place at Preston Place in October 2017 and then December 2017. And we don't come back to Preston Place until March 4th. Okay.
And then previously in all the ones that happened at the Tradition, what is it called?
Traditions.
When do they stop?
They end October 30th of 2016.
Okay, that's what I was saying. So the Traditions end at the end of October 16, and it doesn't pick up again until Preston Place in 17.
Right.
He was doing other stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the points they make in this docuseries is that he's likely doing other things. Now, when he leaves the Preston Place, like he feels like something's going on after that Jane Doe. He actually goes out into the world to do this. A woman named Carolyn McPhee is 81. She's in good health, but her husband is being cared for by Benjamin Kotoba. And he came with good references. Several of the children and cousins in the family appear in the docuseries talking about the fact that he was a little weird. And looking back, they get it. But like at the time, they just thought he was weird. He seemed to take good care of Jack McPhee. But on December 31st of 2017, Carolyn McPhee, who is Jack's wife, she's killed. So we move into January 17th of 2018. And Margaret, the girlfriend, is caring for a woman named Rosemary Curtis. She's 76 years old when she is killed. And we have a really good take on the January 31st, 2018 murder of a woman named Mary Brooks. Mary Brooks is stalked by Billy Chimere at a local Walmart. They literally follow him around the Walmart, and they follow his car following her car out of the parking lot.
Right. And Walmart, historically even, they have one of the best camera systems.
They do.
And they have it's not only is it one of the most comprehensive, but it's also like retrievable, right?
Yeah,
and
it's the archive that makes it like a step above everyone else.
Right. And so it comes up quite a bit. And so, obviously, Chimere did not realize that.
No, he did not know that everything he was doing was being recorded. So after this death on January 31st of 2018, we go back to Preston Place for 3 more murders. Martha Williams is killed there March 4th of 2018. Miriam Nelson is killed on March 9th, 2018. And then Ann Conklin is killed on March 18th of 2018. Now, that's it for the assisted living homicides. But we have another homicide on March 20th of 2018.
Just a moment.
Yeah.
So Miriam Nelson, there was an anomaly sort of in her case because somebody had come in her apartment and she had told her family about it just days before she was murdered. And so her case brought attention because of that.
Because she told the family someone had
she had she relayed to her daughter that a man had come in her apartment, said he was looking for a leak, that they could hear water running downstairs. He had on he was nicely dressed and he had on rubber gloves, and she had one of her diamond necklaces out, and he took it while he was in there.
Yes.
Or she assumed he took it. That raised all kinds of flags with the family, and then she turned around and ended up dead. And so they started, so she's the second to last, or maybe third to last victim, but that started immediately as a suspicious death, not just a natural causes situation. I think that may have even started a homicide investigation.
Yeah, it seems to have started to. If it didn't spark an out investigation, it certainly was suspicious when other things were brought to light here. Because we have 2 odd things that happen. He kills another victim off-site, who's 81-year-old Lutai Harris, and that's March 20th, 2018. That's actually his last homicide. But what gets him is this woman named Kay Lawson. And that took place before the Preston Place murders in 2017. You were asking me about, does it jump from 2016 to 2017? Technically, Kay Lawson is the first one at Preston Place. Kay Lawson survives an attack by Billy Chimere and identifies him. So he's already kind of in the crosshairs at that point for assaulting Kay Lawson. But between October 29th and the assault on Kay Lawson, we have 13 more victims before they arrest him. They arrest him in March of 2018, and March 20th of 2018, and they accuse him of smothering to death Miriam Nelson. And they end up linking him to Lutai Harris.
Right. So they were actually, after the Miriam Nelson's death was raising red flags and they were looking into it, they got a tip from another resident's son who had spotted somebody out of place. And the guy happened to have jotted down the license plate number of the vehicle that the man that he found to be suspicious sitting in the parking lot at his mom's retirement community, right?
Yeah.
Because he asked the guy, he said, there's all kinds of accounts of people asking, like, can I help you? Right? Saying that to Shamir Mir as he's loitering, trespassing, however you want to put it, stalking. He's in places he's not supposed to be. Now he was nicely dressed, right?
He almost always, even in the videos they have of him, he at least appears to possibly potentially fit in.
Right. Even maybe a little too much, right? In my opinion, but it doesn't really matter. The point was that a lot of people would see the same people over and over again, but it also wasn't strange enough to run into somebody you didn't recognize to like immediately call the police every time, right?
Right.
And so, because, there would be caregivers that would come and go, but there was, like I said, after Miriam Nelson's death had raised flags, I guess they were just canvassing the whole area. And one of the residents' sons said, hey, I saw this guy. I thought he looked suspicious. I asked him if I could help him. He didn't, he said whatever he said. He was like, I got his license plate. And he gave it to police. And when police ran that, the car had been in a car accident just recently. And they linked it to William Shamir Mir.
Yeah.
And so they had found where he lived, and they were sitting out in the parking lot waiting for him to get home. They observed, according to the documentary, the detective I believe it's a detective that was waiting for him to get home. They observed him throw stuff away in the dumpster and then go into his apartment. They took him into custody and they retrieved the stuff from the dumpster, and the stuff in the dumpster was linked to Lou T. Harris, right?
Correct.
And they immediately had a welfare check done on her, and she was found deceased in her home, likely by less than an hour.
Correct. So the day of his arrest for Miriam Nelson's murder, is the day that Lou Harris died.
Right. And they were able to track him back again to Walmart and watch him as he had stalked Lou T. Harris and essentially followed her home.
Correct. They arrest him. They charge him with Miriam Nelson. He ends up indicted by May. So he's arrested in March of 2018. He ends up indicted by May of 2019 on 11 additional counts of capital murder. So he's got a dozen counts of murder. And they start piecing together, the prosecutors start piecing together what cases they are able to put together between his records, his data and locations, and different unattended deaths that involved robberies, where they can then track him to different gold and gem exchanges where he's selling this jewelry. And like I said, this is one of the most fascinating things to watch, because they will, in the documentary at least, and I'm sure the trial didn't unfold just like this. It's done for for the dramatization. You can watch a guy on the screen testifying to $91,000 worth of, jewelry transactions. And they show him leaving one place, going to the gold exchange and coming in, because the gold exchange also has cameras on the door, and sitting and talking to people that he has literally just committed a homicide and stolen someone's jewelry. And now he is smiling, shaking hands, and chatting with people in the lobby of the gold exchange as he turns that person's jewelry into money. That's one of the things that I think makes this also unique for me, is being able to watch him do that. You don't see him commit the homicides, but you see him go into the room, come out of the room, go into the Walmart, follow a woman out of the Walmart, leave the facility and come into the gold exchange and sell their jewelry. It is wild. In spite of all that, we get a trial set for February 7th, 2020. It gets delayed. Finally, in November of 2021, he goes on trial, and the jury deadlocks 11-1, and they end up having to retry him on Lou Thee Harris's murder. So the retrial begins on April 25th of 2022, and this is much shorter. They take out a lot of the sort of charming and personable interrogation that he did with different detectives, but they also take out a lot of the police using different tactics to get Billy Chemirmir to talk because they felt like it confused the jury. And on April 28th of 2022, the jury convicts Billy Chemirmir of Lou Thee Harris's murder. The death penalty was not on the table, so they end up sentencing him to life in prison. And then they had already announced, by the way, like I think it's in May the previous year, that they weren't going to be able to seek the death sentence. They just wanted to get the convictions. The same thing happens in Collin County. He goes on trial for the murder of Mary Brooks over there in 2022. And they warn him up front, they're not looking for the death penalty. They just want an extra conviction to keep him in prison in case anything happens with the Lou Thee Harris murder. So he is convicted on October 7th, 2022 of the murder of Mary Brooks, and he gets sentenced to life in prison. For the most part after that, they dismiss the rest of the charges. And
they dismiss the indictments. He was indicted on, I believe, 11...
12 total counts.
12 total counts. Okay.
Yep.
And so they dismissed the rest of them because they had him in with 2 different life imprisonment sentences. So basically that was just covering to make sure that it wasn't overturned, right?
Correct. A lot of actions have been initiated in this time, by the way, that are related to the civil side of this. So the different families in different instances are going after, there is a home healthcare entity that starts all of this, but for the most part, they're going after the different assisted living facilities. And that's one of those fascinating parts of the documentary. And that's why I call the documentary a little bit of propaganda, because they are pushing like more and more as you go that the owners of those facilities, and they're right, they're totally right, even though it's propaganda, it's totally correct. It's just, this is the only way to get that story out there. Because I think I went and pulled his wiki page, and I think it's 3 paragraphs long. And I watched this.
There is not much. This is the first time this has been, so this is a huge deal, right?
Yeah,
and for it to be such a huge deal, it didn't get traction. It's got to be something to do with the ageism, the underlying natural causes on the death certificate, the just general sort of, I mean, because he found a situation that he was able to replicate and duplicate across several different retirement communities and get away with it, right? I mean, all I can think is like when Josh Ailman with the security at Edgemere, was he at Edgemere?
He was at Edgemere.
And the maintenance guys, when they took him into custody and had called the police, and he got I think he got 70 days and he only served 12 for trespassing.
Yeah.
And they felt good about the fact that they had gotten this guy. I think he was probably smirking because he had murdered people there.
Yeah, he had just killed at least 3 people.
And he's like, all you guys did was get me for trespassing. Sure, I'll stay away from this facility. There's other facilities for me to go to. And this guy had no conscience at all. Okay, he literally was feeding a power drive to go out to these clubs and act like he was somebody important. That's what he was doing. And he was, I don't know what leads somebody to become what this person was, right? As far as like him just like thoughtlessly smothering these women to death over and over again, and the man, if he thought about it for just a little bit, there's nothing that makes you big and bad about smothering Granny and taking her diamonds.
No, it doesn't. It makes you the worst kind of person. And like, I know people put the child killers and child assaulters and the people who assault women up there. This guy's right beside them.
Oh, absolutely. He's right beside of them. And it gets, and so it wasn't, the crimes weren't sexually motivated. None of these women were sexually assaulted. He literally smothered them all with a pillow in a pillowcase, and took the real jewelry that they had. And he had just found his cash cow, right? I mean, that's what he was doing. And so he was walking around these places. He wasn't working there. He had no reason to be there. Now, as far as the civil litigation involved in this, I do think that families might overestimate I think the expectations are high. Now, granted, I do feel like security should be there, but I wouldn't take it for granted. There is issues to be litigated here, but ultimately, in this type of environment, it's going to be really hard to prevent somebody who's this determined, right? And that is able to get away with it over and over again like that. He was just getting more and more confident.
Yeah, he was. And if you look at, like, his crimes are very simple. So he's posing as either some kind of aide or home care person or medical professional.
And only if he's asked.
And only if he's caught, right, and he has to answer. Or he had posed as a maintenance person, and this was how he gained access to different rooms, I guess you would call it. I was going to say properties, but I guess this is how he gained access to the residences of these people in order to steal from them. There's no telling how many women and men he stole from that he didn't kill when he was able to access, rooms with no person in there. There's no telling how many additional victims he has. So for the sake of a time frame, this guy is 43 to 45 years old while this massive murder spree is happening. And from what we can tell, he killed 24 people. Now, he's only got 2 confirmed murders. In total, he was indicted for 22 different murders, but really he was mainly indicted for the first 12. And then even though they did indict him in the other county, they kick everything except for these 2 that he is convicted for.
They don't kick it till after his conviction. Now, I would have pushed for a plea on them. That may have been out of the question. I don't entirely understand, but I'm not sure, like, I feel like maybe they just didn't see the gravity of the situation, possibly. Like, maybe it took a little bit to kind of really, because to me, this is a huge deal, right?
Well, this is all in hindsight. To be fair, you and I are looking at this.
I agree. But in my thought, when they said that they dismissed the indictments after they had gotten the 2 convictions, I was like, I understand that. However, they could have sought the death penalty just based on the fact that there are so many murders, right? And pushed for him to plead guilty. I feel like that would have made the families happier, right? Or not happier, but
I think it would have served more towards the leanings of justice.
Well, certainly. And I do think that there are lots of nuances that go into each of these cases surrounding Shamir Mir's activities and the amount of time they went on and all the different things involved. And I feel like that there were some hurdles that would have to be overcome, right?
Yeah.
But you can kind of tell where the point of view, the perspective is. The prosecutor got a bad guy off the streets and made sure he wasn't going to get back out. The families were pretty let down when all the indictments were dismissed. Now, I don't have any being the way that it was presented in the docuseries and the very little bit of information I've been able to get otherwise, I have no question that he is guilty of not only those murders, but probably more. Right. In fact, I have a feeling they stopped looking, right? Because this is such an atrocity that it has to stop somewhere. And so because he had been put in prison, I don't feel like they're going to go back and find all the murders that he's committed. There's no question this man would murder anybody for very little amounts of return financially.
Yeah.
And he would do so in a way that would make them end up being listed to have died from natural causes, which it's so maniacally simple, right?
He is, and I saw this kind of disputed, but this is one of the most organized rackets of a serial killer I've ever seen.
He's very organized, but he has a very traditional motive. And
money.
That's it. And usually serial killers don't have a traditional motive. And I maintain he was simply killing the witness he had just stolen from, as opposed to seeking out the kill.
Yeah.
If there had been a way for him to get money without killing people,
he was probably also doing that.
Well, yeah, I think so too. But I'm saying I don't think that this guy is a serial killer in that he got off on the kill. I think he got off on the money that he got and what he used that money for, right? Maybe I'm wrong.
I do want to point out something. During the pandemic, Shamir came up for me, and I didn't even realize it. There was a memorandum in support in federal court of a motion to intervene by the state of Texas, the governor of Texas, and the attorney generals of Texas, where there was a rule happening in federal court that potentially could have impacted Shamir Mir. And I would just want to read a paragraph from it because it was fascinating to me. Essentially, there was a request to release a number of individuals from different jails, and one of those people included everyone in the Dallas County Jail. The plaintiffs for this are going to be Oscar Sanchez, Marcus White, Tasman McDonald. This is like one of those suits that came up because of the pandemic and whether or not you could keep people imprisoned on lesser charges. And it kind of comes out as this big blanket motion, I guess you would say. But it says the plaintiffs would have the court order injunctive or habeas relief, releasing a class of individuals they have defined as everyone in the Dallas County Jail. Their requested relief covers a number of people, including armed robbers, rapists, arsonists, and killers. Plaintiffs want this jail empty. They want the court to empty the jail and in the process ignore multiple judgments, custodial sentences, detainer and transfer requests from sovereign governments, state court bail orders. They're asking for extraordinary relief. They have not certified a class or they have not tried to satisfy any of the Prison Litigation Reform Act's requirements. And the effect that the plaintiffs ask is extraordinary and would include Billy Shamir Mir, probably one of the state's most prolific serial killers. Shamir Mir is accused of murdering 12 women, all between ages 75 and 94, by smothering them to death and making off with their jewelry. Currently set with a secured bail at $13.6 million. The federal government, moreover, filed an immigration detainer with Dallas County, meaning Shamir Mir will be deported in the very unlikely event he is ever allowed to step foot outside of jail again. And the plaintiffs are now asking this court to consider setting him free because he and others like him might possibly be exposed to COVID-19. It is obvious that releasing Shamir Mir and other violent felons threatens the public safety, something echoed by law enforcement and victims' rights advocates. Clearly, this did not go in Shamir Mir's favor, but I wanted to mention it here because it came up.
One of the best parts of this story is that we don't have to worry about Shamir Mir anymore, because in September of 2023, he was beaten to death by his cellmate.
Yeah, they have a really good article from WFAA. Have you read like the whole thing that they released?
I don't know.
So they released a report after his death on September 27th of 2023. It says, suspected North Texas serial killer Billy Shamir was killed by his prison cellmate with a knife or edged instrument, according to the Texas Attorney General's office. The report was filed September 27th, confirming what officials had previously said about Shamir Mir's death, in that his cellmate was the suspect. It's a guy named Wyatt Busby. The report, which was filed as a custodial death report as part of the Attorney General's investigation, they would only say that Shamir Mir was assaulted by a cellmate and sustained injuries resulting in his death. But the new report says Shamir Mir died of blunt force trauma and that of a knife or edged instrument. His cellmate's name has not been released, although officials did confirm he was serving time on a murder charge out of Harris County. The killing happened at the Caulfield State Prison in Tennessee Colony, a town located about halfway between Houston and Dallas. Dallas County District Attorney John Cruzat told WFAA that Shamir Mir was killed after apparently making an inappropriate comments that were sexual in nature about his cellmate's children. According to the DA, the cellmate allegedly beat Shamir Mir, dragged him out of his cell, and killed him while other inmates watched. No one intervened, and Shamir Mir may have been also stabbed with a pen. Even though they are on lockdown, apparently the cellmate somehow opened the door, dragged Shamir Mir into the hallway, and there with other prisoners seeing it, not one intervened, no one called for help. He was basically there for 15 to 20 minutes before anybody with authority could figure out what had happened. When they got there, they tried to revive Shamir Mir, but he was dead. Shamir Mir was convicted in April 2022 of capital murder and the smothering death of 81-year-old Luthi Harris. He received the same punishment after being convicted of killing 87-year-old Mary Brooks. It was Mary Anna Spartel's survival of a March 2018 attack that set Shamir Mir's arrest in motion. They reference a couple of others who survived and were able to identify him. But the bottom line is, what do you think of that particular death?
I think that he purposefully provoked his cellmate and manipulated him into killing him because he is a coward and he didn't want to be in prison for the rest of his life. What is stated in the statement, it doesn't really make any sense, except that it could be that the reason none of his crimes reflect that of a sexual sadist is because he's a pedophile.
Oh, interesting.
And so that would be like a whole different thing, right? But so either he was a pedophile, and that that's something else, or he said what he could to be killed. Like he it's suicide by cellmate.
Yeah, it's bait. I can't kill myself. Will you help me? But you don't say that. You say something that you know is going to result in what happened.
Right. And so I have absolutely no feelings towards that at all. Like even if he didn't bait himself or bait his cellmate into doing it or whatever, that's like street justice, I guess.
Well, I'm disappointed in the fact that with Shamir Mir, we don't get closure. I would like to have like some closure where I knew who he killed and I knew like the whole story. I don't think somebody like Shamir Mir was ever going to give us that, particularly when every interview is, I didn't do this. I'm never going to spend any time in prison.
He was very sure of that. he actually went on a podcast and said, like, I will never go to the penitentiary. They don't have enough evidence against me. I didn't do this. And there was a ton of evidence on him.
Yeah.
And while I will say, going into that docuseries, now it just showed up randomly, and I think I was actually watching something else and it came on. I was skeptical and dismissive. So I will say that, like, just based on sort of the trailer of the situation, I was skeptical and dismissive. However, when I got done with the docuseries, I was not.
Yeah.
It is a horrifying reality that, if for nothing else, like, anybody that's ever going to have a parent that ages or going to age themselves, so basically everyone, they should be aware that this has occurred. And that's not to say that it's, common or it would happen again, but, like, this is something that, I feel like it takes a very depraved mind to illustrate for kind of just the general audience of true crime, right? Even the general audience of true crime, so people who are used to, criminal type stuff. This goes beyond that even, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a man who was smothering little old ladies to death to steal their diamonds. And every single one of these women, like, they deserved so much better. And, I do see a lot of pain in the families, right? But, it's not any of their faults. Everybody in the situation, they were relying on what they knew. And so by going forward and bringing the story to light, they're helping other people have even more knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And so now people facing the situation will be aware that, Shamir Mir existed and did this, and take concerns that an older person might have more seriously, right? Encourage their mom or dad to not open the door for people that they don't know. Get their parent that's living at a assisted living facility or retirement community a doorbell cam.
Yeah.
Even one that you could access so you can see who's going in and out. I don't know. That might be a privacy thing, but I'm just saying, like, it just helps kind of open the door, because I feel like the overlying theme with the docuseries and everybody who played a part in it, especially the family members, was that, like, they never dreamt of something like this happening.
Yeah, it's interesting how the media handled him, because I didn't know anything, like, about Shamir Mir in terms of this, and it actually took me a minute. So I watched the docuseries in short time, and then afterwards I started fact checking, and it's wild. Like, not only is this an underestimate, like, I don't think this is even close based on gaps in his timeline, where I couldn't figure out, like, when he's in jail and stuff like that. Because, like, he'd get these sentences that are like 3 months, but he'd only do 2 weeks, and then he's, like, technically on probation, but he's out back in the world.
Well, he didn't have he worked supposedly for his sister in the healthcare industry, I believe. He worked for a family member who had a care agency. Okay. And not a home. Like, they basically would be called and they would go to people's homes, right?
Yeah,
and
it's a home care agency.
So for the most part, he had no job.
He really didn't.
He did not have a sustainable income to the extent that, and it is because I believe he was using the false identity, and there's a lot that goes into that we aren't really going to get into. As far as his family member knew, they would be putting the agency at risk by sending him out on calls. So I have a feeling that around the 10 or 12 mark, when he got those convictions or whatever, that's probably about the time this all started, because he was having to supplement his income, right?
Correct. That's what I think.
And then it became his income eventually, because I don't actually know what the laws are, but I'm going to take a guess that like you can't be convicted of any sort of felony
Correct.
to work as a home health care person.
A lot of the early arrests he had would affect any kind of licensing. Yes.
Right. And, you know, in the situation, there's a whole plethora of levels of things you're talking about here, right? And as far as like, I mean, he wasn't acting like he was a nurse, right?
No, he was acting like he was acting sort of ambivalent in the few videos they catch him in. He's almost dressed like an orderly or like a CNA. Like he has like the polo shirt with the scrub pants in one of the videos.
He was
He's
actually
not,
he was
but,
wearing a shirt from a agency he didn't work for any longer.
right. But he looks like, my point is, he looks like someone who would be coming in to like assist someone else.
Right, and that's why he was able to pull it off, sort of, because like if he was wearing a hoodie and some sweatpants, I mean, it would have
been way more obvious. Yeah,
right, and you know it is interesting because he had enough self-awareness to sort of, I mean, he got this ruse down pat. Like, it is insane that he was able to get away with this like he did.
This was his life for those 2 years and probably beyond that a little bit.
I'm so worried that it was so much more. Whenever it started, right? Whenever it started, you can rest assured that's all he did for money from that point forward.
Yeah, that's my thought on it too. And it's probably somewhere you almost have to have a ramping up where he figures out he can do it.
Well, or he worked as an actual caregiver for so long that he was able to observe the circumstances. By happenstance, he realized that like not a whole lot of investigation was done when somebody died from natural causes, or, you know, something happened that made him realize he could get away with it, especially headed towards sort of the middle there where he killed like all those people right in a row.
Yeah.
At Traditions. It would be interested to know all that stuff. He was never going to give the story, I have no doubt. But he also didn't, he just straight up denied it, right? He didn't.
I tried to find a way he might not have done this, and it's just impossible.
There is no way. Yeah, he definitely. Now, that's not to say that, like, I mean, I could go crazy and inflate the numbers, but I don't even think you would have to in this particular case because of what he was doing and getting away with. Like, he literally was just looking for financial gain.
Yeah, we have less than a 24-month period that involves 24. He was killing a victim a month.
Well, and then during the period of like, there's a period of time where it's like bang, 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 and then you find out on the docuseries that not only was it bang, 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 these women all lived like on the same floor.
Yeah, and he killed like 8 of them, like 8 people in a. Yeah,
nobody's going what? Like, I mean, yes, the family started going like what, but it was almost like it was like. I do think it was kept a little too hush-hush. But again, everybody's going, well, the medical examiner said that this was natural causes, right? And there's a lot of stock put into that. And I've realized more so recently that that is not necessarily a good way to be about that.
Yeah. This is a wild one. I think people should go and watch the documentary, learn more about this guy. Unfortunately, I think what's out there is it. I don't think there's a way to investigate this. You literally have to pick an entire county, in this case 2 counties, and investigate 10 years worth of natural deaths in order to even get close. I don't even know how you do it. You would maybe track him to different locations and figure it out, but you're not going to have, like, even throughout the docuseries, these facilities have changed hands in some instances, and the new owners aren't participating in this because they don't have any knowledge of it all, and the old owners want to avoid it because there was civil litigation over it.
Right, I guarantee you, like all of them changed hands, even if it was just from somebody's left hand to their right hand. Yeah, they wanted to have plausible deniability here because it's really bad.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, this is one of the most, like, people talk about, like, why don't we have serial killers anymore? Well, here's one. I know he's not your sexual sadist lust murderer, but in my opinion, this type of murder is a little pure evil.
This guy was absolutely probably one of the purest forms of evil that I've ever seen demonstrated on this earth.
Yeah. He's definitely one of the purest forms that I've ever seen. We are back. I think there's a week off in here, and then we're back with multiple episodes on a new serial killer. Meg and I are working on a cold case out of Chicago with a victim's family that we're going to put together. We're also working on, I don't know if that's going to make the feed here or be its own thing yet, but we definitely have a number of cases coming up this summer. We were also looking at a pretty major crime we covered before that potentially has a much, much different outcome than we thought it did. And we've been going through trying to figure out how to cover that trial at some point day by day. It's very complex, and there's a lot of audio that is outside of our control quality-wise, so we're having to do some stuff there. But yeah, Billy Shamir, the pillowcase murders. And you got anything else for this week?
All I would say is that Paramount Plus has a free trial period, and if you're a Walmart Plus member, you can sign up and get a free membership of Paramount Plus.
Yes, and also check your phone provider. If certain cell phone providers, you automatically get a free Walmart Plus subscription with it. Like, I don't know which ones it was, but somehow that's one of the things that happened at our house. We had a free Walmart Plus subscription through that, and I piggybacked on it to get a free Paramount Plus.
Right, and we're not paid by any of these things. We just are. I'm just giving it as a hint because I know that it gets a little bit ridiculous with all the TV streaming subscriptions, but that one's one you can get for free if you have a Walmart Plus. So
yeah. And,
there you go. I highly recommend watching this docuseries. I feel like it's definitely worth it. It's something that's fresh and new, and they put the work in. It's not just a regurgitation. In fact, there aren't any. There will be, but there aren't yet any. This is pretty much the only coverage of the entirety of this case.
Yeah, this was definitely the most thorough account of it, and I highly recommend it as well. It's if you're wanting something brand new to watch that you can consume, it's multiple hours long. I think every episode is over an hour long, and there are 3 episodes.
It is, and you can be skeptical, and you can be reluctant to believe it, and you'll still be convinced at the end.
Yeah, and you can send me emails telling me how I'm wrong. That's fine too.
Thank you so much for listening today. We'll see you next time. This is True Crime XS. All right, so I'm going to tell you guys a few things about some of the folks who are helping sponsor our show. Now, Labrati Creations sponsors our show, and you can always use the Crime XS code there. You can also just message them at Labrati Creations, and they will generally do something for the people who come from True Crime XS. They were our very first sponsor. They've done a lot for the show, and that code is CrimeXS at LabratiCreations.com. The first new advertisers that we have, and I've selected all of these guys. I've selected all of these advertisers. So the very first one is Cure. Now, I'm going to tell you guys about this, about Cure as being one of our sponsors. If you're an athlete, you know that proper hydration is key to peak performance, but plain water can be boring, and sports drinks can be filled with artificial ingredients and added sugars. That's why we love Cure. It's a clean and effective way to stay hydrated and perform at your best. I use it late in the day when I switch out of caffeine mode. Specifically, when I hit the pool or I go play tennis with my wife, I use Cure to help me stay hydrated. It helps me recover after a long day. Now, you guys may not know this, but I build things. And right now, I've been building several structures on our property out here. Among those is a new podcast studio space for myself. I do a lot of that work at night and into the wee hours. And I always have some Cure with me to go into my aluminum water bottle. Hydration is not just about filling up my aluminum bottle with water. Cure Hydration is an oral rehydration solution that contains the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb water and rehydrate quickly. Whether I'm building things or putting the podcast together or chasing these dogs that you sometimes hear in my studio up and down the trails to get them worn out, Cure Hydration is the way that I choose to go. Cure Hydration is an oral rehydration solution, or an ORS, that contains the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb water and to rehydrate quickly. The formula is made with all natural ingredients like coconut water powder and pink Himalayan salt. It's free from artificial flavors, from sweeteners, and preservatives. Cure Hydration is vegan, gluten-free, and non-GMO, making it a great option for anyone with dietary restrictions or preferences. The packets are convenient and easy to use. You just mix them with your water and you drink. They're perfect for on the go. They're perfect for travel. And anytime you need a quick and effective hydration boost, ready to combat dehydration, then you try Cure today and feel the difference for yourself. You can use code TrueCrimeXS for 20% off your order. That's TrueCrimeXS. I have a link that I'm putting in the most recent episode show notes, and TrueCrimeXS will get you 20% off. Our second sponsor for the show today is Laird. Now, Laird has a list of things that they want me to tell you about. They have better ingredients with amazing taste and functional benefits. They have a superfood creamer crafted from the highest quality, all-natural, real food ingredients. All Laird products are sustainably sourced and thoroughly tested to ensure that you're incorporating the cleanest, finest fuel into your routine. They have all natural whole food ingredients, and they contain naturally occurring MCTs made from coconut oil. There's no artificial flavors, there's no colors or additives, and there's no sugar from highly refined corn syrup. They want me to talk about my love of coffee, but the truth is, I don't do much with coffee. But let me tell you someone who does. My wife has to have a cup of coffee every day. Now, I've fallen off recently, but one of the big things that I've done since the beginning of our relationship is she used to go and get a Starbucks every morning. I have substituted that out by always trying to make her coffee. It's not going to be every single day of time from when I met her, but for the most part, almost every day, I make her coffee. I put her creamers together, and I make sure that she has a good way to start her day. So with Laird, he started experimenting with his morning ritual almost 2 decades ago. He found that when he started adding fats to his morning cup, like coconut oil, he had amazing energy throughout the rest of his day. He gradually perfected this recipe for an epic cup of fuel, and he began sharing it with his friends in the surf community. I'm an ocean guy, so I saw this item and I was like, okay, we're going to try this one out. Are you ready to feel more energized, more focused, and supported? Go to lairdsuperfood.com and add nourishing plant-based foods to fuel you from sunrise to sunset. And you can use our promo code at checkout to save 15% off your purchase today. Our offer code for this for Laird is going to be TrueCrimeXS. Pretty much everywhere except for Labrati Creations. If you use TrueCrimeXS, that will get you, at Laird, it'll get you 15% off. At some of the other places, they'll get you 20%. And the last sponsor I want to tell you about is Zencastr. We are part of Zencastr's creative network. We've been using Zencastr since about midway into our first season. Meg and I experimented with a lot of different ways to put the podcast together. And the truth is, Zencastr, an integral ingredient to us being able to bring you this show. It's so easy. It's now super easy. You can record a podcast with Zencastr. You can log in using your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. You can record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guest. You get to feel a sense of zen, knowing that Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you will always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. You sound your best. I mean, if you've ever worried about what you sound like, Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recordings. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. You can set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. That's how you don't hear my dogs every second of every episode. Zencastr is all in one. If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are now over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place, and you can distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code TrueCrimeXS, and you're going to get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. You can also check out the other plans they have available. I want you to have the same easy experiences that I do for all my podcasting and content needs. So zencastr.com/pricing. The offer code is TrueCrimeXS, and it's time for you to share your story today. We are also adding New Era as a sponsor for the show. New Era Cap is a headwear and apparel brand founded in 1920 in Buffalo, New York. Now, I actually have some experience with New Era caps. My dad and I have been through multiple iterations of baseball caps through the years. We collect different styles, different eras, and now my teenager has started his own cap collection and has several New Eras as the centerpieces. Our favorite teams may not be the same, but our outfits are all topped with the same New Era ball caps. We love the quality and the ability to wear what the players are wearing. Not to mention, New Era is the leading headwear manufacturer with quality licensed products. You can support your favorite college or pro team in style from the official headwear provider for the MLB, NFL, and NBA. You can get a stylish accessory for your everyday ensemble and support True Crime XS. Just shop the official headwear and get 15% off when you go to neweracap.com. That's neweracap.com/TrueCrimeXS. You can also use the code TrueCrimeXS at checkout. That's it. That's all you have to do. And that's 15% off your order using the promo code TrueCrimeXS.